things will go well. I'm going to do this. I just want you to know I absolutely love you. Okay, I got an aircraft. Negative contact. We're looking at United 93.
Yeah, somewhere up northeast of Camp David.
Battalion 1 to Battalion 7. Battalion 7 to Battalion 1. Have your feet, base.
Help, you gotta get off the floor.
Transmitting the urgent. Identified. Major collapse in one of the towers. Tower, Kate. South tower. Major collapse. 10-4. Person transmitting to Mayday. Where are you, Kate?
What you just saw and heard was a brief peek into the past of September 11th, 2001, 23 years ago. A day where clearly the United States citizen was paralyzed in fear. But arguably, all of humanity. This is because the best and worst of mankind was on display that day. Incredible acts of valor, courage, and sacrifice, but in the same vein, horrible acts that took the lives of 2,977 people, 343 firefighters, 60 police officers, and a host of other different first responders, including Port Authority. But what does seldomly get talked about is the 6,781 people who survived 9/11, who passed from respiratory diseases, cancers, and exposure-related illnesses. See, I did a 9/11 stair climb, not impressive and very little worth talking about. But what I do think is worth discussing is the sobering effect that it had and the perspective shift that it gave me. Because at any point in time, I could have put my hands on my knees to catch a breather. I could have sat down to take a break, taken a drink of water. Or I could have just stopped altogether if I wanted to. But those people on that day did not have that choice. They didn't have the option to sit this one out. They had tools, extra gear, victims, extra weight to carry, multiple trips up those buildings. And it really changes your perspective. Makes you feel a lot smaller when you're standing on the shoulders of giants. And I feel like an even better way of honoring them is to tell some of their stories. And the bigger point of this is to demonstrate that this lives in all of us, that just as many first responders, there was also citizens, average Joes like you and I, who ran into the danger and the perils, risked their lives, and some lost their lives with no first responder training, just the desire and the passion to help and to run to the calls for help. So we're going to talk about Captain Jay Jones from Ladder Company 6. We're going to touch on Todd Beamer and his actions that led to the lives potentially saved on Flight 93, along with the Red Bandana Man, or also known as Wells Crowther. And see, what is very interesting about 2 out of the 3 stories is that 2 of them are civilians. One, of course, first responder, and there's a host of so many stories that I wish I had a whole podcast that lasted for several hours so we can go through all of them, but it's the point that I'm trying to draw here is that this desire to go above and beyond and to step out of our comfort to help somebody in need is in all of us. It's just whether we choose to forego some of those things that we would consider inconveniences so that we can be of service to those in need, instead of going, yes, it made me be a little bit behind today, or, it may set me back as far as, my logistics or whatnot. But at the end of the day, I made a difference. And so, of course, it's not necessarily saying that we have to go to this extreme. But let's get into this, right? So let's talk about Captain Jay Jones. What did he do? So FDNY Fire Captain Jones from Ladder Company 6 and his crew was in the North Tower prior to its collapse. And as they were going down and trying to evacuate, they stumbled upon a woman named Josephine Harris in the 20th floor. Seeing her obviously injured and struggling to walk, they realized they had a choice. Get out, save yourself, stay, risk everything, including your life, for this woman in need who cannot help herself. And just that decision alone, obviously you think, of course, your first responders, that's your job and stuff like that. But when the moment comes where you potentially see your life near its end and choices you have to make, it may not be as easy as it's initially presented, right? If you think that, oh my gosh, I'm going to die, that fight or flight sort of situation. So they chose to help her and stay with her despite whatever consequences that may befall them. They worked her down and was assisting her until they got to about the fourth floor, and the building collapsed at the top of them. And you would think, well, that's a tragic end of the story. However, for some strange miraculous reason, stairwell B, the stairwell that they were in, stayed preserved and untarnished during the collapse, which ultimately led to Josephine, Captain Jonas, and his crew surviving. So they saved her. And in a feat of miraculous that led to the building collapsing, but yet not on them. Saved their lives. And there's so many more stories like that. But then as we're fast forwarding to Todd Beamer. So who is Todd Beamer, right? And instead of just, what's his name, but like, who is a little bit about him? Like, these people are, had so much about them other than just a name, right? And so he had dreams of becoming a professional baseball player. He boarded the flight not knowing his actions or those that were with him that day were going to save countless lives. And he planned on flying back to New Jersey that same day after going from New Jersey to San Francisco. The flight was taking off from Newark and bound for San Fran. And he was going to turn around and come right back so he can be with his pregnant wife and his 2 young boys. So about 46 minutes into the flight, the same fate would encompass the Flight 93. And they were hijacked. And Todd Beamer and company had a choice to, just like Captain J, we can take the easy option and hope it all plays out, or we can take the higher road and the option where it requires an immense amount of courage. And so his last recorded words over the phone was, "Let's roll," is to say, I'm not going down without a fight, stormed the cockpit, forcing the hijackers to bury the aircraft into the ground into the rural areas of Pennsylvania. And just for perspective, the flight was 20 minutes of flight time outside of the capital. Where their crosshairs are, we may never know. However, the lives that were spared are likely a unfathomable amount of number, because the targets of the range of that aircraft are just uncalculable. So about at 9:05, the Flight 93 crashed. They subsequently sacrificed themselves in pursuit of saving others. The Red Bandana Man, or also known as Welles Crowther, a civilian who was there that day and decided to go in and help. When the hijacked flight of 175 hit the World Trade Center's South Tower, people on the 78th floor sky lobby huddled together, frightened and confused. No way out, at least as far as they could see, because all the smoke and wreckage and debris. But out of the debris and smoke comes the Red Bandana Man. A complete civilian, now hero, and wearing a cape, rescuing this group of people on the 78th floor, getting them out. And you would say, well, a job well done, right? That's just call that a day. And according to Welles Crowther, that was just the warm up, because he went back up to the 78th floor to do it again. And he rescued more people. And some would say, well, okay, a lot would say, that's a incredible feat there, and you could probably sit this one out. You've done enough. Nope, not according to him. There was more lives, more people. As long as there was more people in there, it seemed like he had a mission, and he was going in again, and he went in for the 3rd time. And this time, unfortunately, the building collapsed with him inside it. And so what this shows and demonstrates is this ability to act when called upon is in all of us, and not necessarily at the scale in which we're talking about today, but even on a smaller scale, to help your fellow man. Because at this point in time, it didn't matter. No rescuer or civilian ran in and said, what's your affiliation, political affiliation, creed, your background, your color? None of that mattered. What mattered is somebody crying out for help, a fellow human needing assistance, and that's all it was. And I think that really says something, that if we could extrapolate that, distill that into a bottle, because man, that is a powerful thing, to where we can pull back the veil of all this divisive and just see each other for what we are, human beings on this journey called life, trying to figure it out. And something really worth mentioning to kind of cap this off is the historical largest evacuation since Dunkirk, which was in World War II. And this evacuation that transpired here in 9/11 was something that was just so unbelievable that it's something recommended to go to the 9/11 memorial. I went several months ago, and I was in awe of just it is a very palpable place to be standing in the same area as those giants did, and those courageous actions that transpired that day. But during this large evacuation, those people who were running from the collapsing towers and had nowhere to go ran to the only place they could, the water. They had no other options. And here comes the average Joe civilian again to the rescue. Some people in boats saw and was like, let's go in and help. And then more came, and then the federal agencies getting involved and coordinating it, and they rescued over 500,000 people. And here's what the crazy part is. In Dunkirk, they rescued and evacuated 380,000 people in World War II, and that took over 9 days to accomplish that. This situation, where we rescued 500,000 people, or they rescued 500,000 people in Lower Manhattan by boat, they did it in less than 9 hours. Unbelievable. Something that hadn't been done until that point by largely a bunch of average Joes, you and me, feeling compelled to answer the call. So really, in final reflection here, we remember 9/11 for not just a tragedy, but for the bravery, the sacrifice, the resiliency, and even all that came out of that situation. Because, meaning, on September 12th, we, at least for a short while, we stopped kind of really emphasizing our differences. At that point, we were all bleeding red, white, and blue. We all were the same family at that point. We pulled back the veil of all the divisiveness and just ripped that away. And for just a short while, we saw each other for what we were as human beings, brother and brother, sister and sister. It's like seeing each other for the first time. And it's like, I wish we could distill that down and bottle it up so we don't have to have another tragedy in order to find that part of our identity again. But I think telling these stories are important because they inspire us. They may give you inspiration to change your perspective a little. That we all have this buried deep down inside to act when called upon for your fellow human being. So let's keep honoring these heroes. And also, seldomly talked about those who survived and either deal with the psychological or the family members who go without the family members. And I just say this is, while there's nothing that could ever quell your grief, they showed us so much that day. They showed us how to give to our fellow human beings. They showed us how we can live our lives. They showed us how we can give compassion unconditionally. And they showed us so much. And so for that, I just say thank you. And although not having them is not, we just are grateful, and I'm grateful for what they did and at least showed me, and I know so many other people out there, and I cannot be more appreciative of that. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, just kind of keep them in your hearts and your prayers and your thoughts today. The families who go without now, sons and daughters who've now grown up without their their parental figure in their life because they chose to pay the ultimate sacrifice for other human beings so others may live, and they lived by that creed and sacrificed by that creed. And so with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to end this special 9/11 episode and we'll leave it at that. We'll see y'all later.